let's start with the biggest name, the GOAT, the most successful coach in NFL history, Bill Belichick. Huge stunner. Even though this was very slow moving, it took a few weeks. There were lots of reports about him meeting with North Carolina, the North Carolina brass, kind of the different factions in North Carolina leadership to decide whether or not they were actually going to go down this road and hire Bill Belichick, and how serious he was about college football. Well, it ends up happening. Still a little bit shocking every time we see photos of him out recruiting or doing his duties as the North Carolina head coach. We're looking at this recruiting photo right now of him in these joggers, which, I know he's got a 24-year-old girlfriend right now, but I don't know if this look works for him.
It's not for him. It's not for him.
A lot of ankles.
Yes.
The suit looks a little bit better, although also looks a little overdressed when he's, going into high schools.
I mean, we're used to seeing him with the cutoff sweatshirt, right? So anytime he's in a suit, and he honestly looks like a schoolboy here with the khakis and the blazer on anyway, but it's a little bit jarring to see him very formal rather than having a torn up sweatshirt on.
Yeah, and they gave him one when he got the job at the introductory press conference. So I'm like, let's just do the cutoff hoodie look for him all the way through. But I do want to talk about what we actually learned and seen and witnessed. So yes, he has gone out recruiting. That was something we wondered, right? You could just pop in, you're 72, you're like, other people can do this. No, he has been out, he's traveled, he's talked to recruits. Still a lot of work to do for their recruiting class, but he's doing that. He brought in Michael Lombardi as his general manager. He brought a bunch of NFL guys in for his staff. His son, Steve Belichick, who we have spent a lot of time covering in the Big Ten last year at Washington as the defensive coordinator. He is his defensive coordinator. So there is definitely a push to be this is going to be run like an NFL organization. Michael Lombardi said earlier this week, everything here is predicated on building a pro team. We consider ourselves the 33rd team because everybody involved with our program has had some form or aspect in pro football. North Carolina went all in. This is a $10 million a year salary for Belichick, more than doubles what Mac Brown was making. It's a play for relevance. It's a play for, hey, maybe this is the future of college football and how you manage rosters, identify talent, develop. So what ultimately, now that the dust has settled, a couple of months of this reality has existed, how do we feel about the Bill Belichick hire?
I feel all right about it. I always felt like this was a little bit of a strange hire from the standpoint of you went from Mac Brown, who was the oldest coach in college football, to Bill Belichick, who's the oldest coach in college football. So from that standpoint, it didn't feel like you got yourself a longer runway to really build into something that could be dynastic. We've seen turnarounds in college football happen pretty quickly, but certainly doesn't feel like this is a super long-term thing that you could be doing there. For the folks who asked the question about is Bill going to recruit? I feel like he always had to. Part of the reason you hire that guy is so he can walk into living rooms in high schools with all of his rings and be like, come play here. So that doesn't shock me at all. Where I think we're seeing a trend of guys who were maybe outside of some of the NFL hiring cycles having more willingness to get into college football because they see the sport heading in the direction of the NFL. I think this is obviously the biggest example, but there are other things that have happened with that. I feel like the sports are still very, very different. They're different from the way that your rosters are allocated. In the NFL, you're used to working with a legitimate cap. And out in college football, certainly with revenue sharing, it feels like it's getting that way. But the collectives obviously have complicated things in the way that you put together your roster. In the NFL, you deal with legitimate contracts. These kids get in and out of the portal like crazy. We watched somebody transfer this year without even getting into the portal. Hear me when I say that. We watched a player go from Wisconsin to Miami without actually getting in the portal. There is not really a way to control your roster and to have players there for however long they say they're going to commit to you. And so I'm curious how all of that is going to work out from that standpoint. I'm excited to see it. I think he's a very intelligent guy. I think that the way that he is planning right now is very detailed. But there are so many differences to me from what the NFL game is to what the college game is. Never mind the fact that we haven't even talked about the idea that these cats actually have to go to class, where Bill Belichick was able to keep them in the building all day long when he was a pro coach. I'm excited to watch what happens here. I think it is a good hire for everybody who says this is a home run, cannot fail. I will not get to that point, but there should be optimism here.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said about this, I think that these jobs are harder than the NFL folks think that they're going to be.
Mhm.
Even as college football is professionalizing, I think this is going to be different and harder than Bill Belichick thought he was signing up for. And I do think he spent a lot of time. Obviously, he was around Washington and his son a lot last year, so he definitely had a better sense of it than some of these other NFL coaches we've seen come into college, and they're like, "Oh, we're just going to do it the way that we've always done it," and it doesn't work. I think he seems to understand what he needs to do. The pro approach I do think will work, and there's a lot especially in the GM role that is going to be much more reflective of pro sports versus like in the last few years it kind of started as like a player personnel role,
Right.
and now it's definitely more related to the cap and to roster management, and spending and finances. So I think that all of that stuff is really smart. But yeah, I mean, you got to report to an athletic director, a university president. You got to report to a board. You have to make sure that your kids are going to class. You need to handle when someone's got a breakup. Like there's just a lot that happens with 18 to 23-year-olds that, when it's your job and you're professional and you're, coaching Tom Brady and he's got his own system and whatever, you just don't worry about that. Now you have to worry about, and now you have to think about. But yeah, it's basically like a 3-year deal. The 3 years are fully guaranteed, and there's
Right.
like 2 more extra years on the contract. So I think you are hoping for a shorter turnaround, which we have seen a lot in college football because of the portal. And you're thinking that, the attraction of wanting to play for Bill Belichick under his system, to see those 8 rings like that he was wearing to NFL honors,
Right.
that's something you want to be around, and that can speed up the turnaround for North Carolina.
I will say this. I think there's an interesting thing that you deal with now when you're a college coach, when it comes to talent acquisition, because in the NFL, literally they had the draft, right? Like you had free agency where you had to attract guys, but certainly you'd be like Patriots dynasty want to go there, but you could draft guys, they have no choice. And I'm curious how other schools will try to negative recruit UNC, because there is a conversation about how much was Tom, how much was Bill.
Mm.
There's a conversation about how poorly he may or may not have drafted when he was the GM of the Patriots. There's a conversation about Mac Jones and how his best year was basically his rookie year and he regressed when he got to the NFL under Bill Belichick's tutelage. Like these are other things that he's going to have to reconcile with as well, where it's like, yeah, we feel like we're out here kind of shooting fish in a barrel because we can go and get whoever we want to, but it's real competitive out there. And people say crazy things on the recruiting trail to try to get kids to go other places. Like it is so interesting just thinking about how he handles even like that kind of minutia about how you acquire players versus the NFL, where it's just like we recruit them in free agency and they were really good at getting guys to take cheap deals. And I don't know if you're getting guys to take cheap deals in college. And you had the draft where you could just get whoever fell to you at your slot based off of what your board was, and that doesn't exist here either.
No, those are all great points. And again, just like what you're saying, without the structure of contracts, the length of the terms, the fact that people are locked in, the ability to go into the portal at any time and play right away somewhere else. Like these are just different dynamics. When people say that college is like free agency, it is to an extent,
Mhm.
but there are way more rules around it in the NFL. So we'll continue to monitor that. I think it's going to give us a lot of offseason storylines. So that one is by far the most interesting of the offseason coaching moves.